do Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice.
Liberty.
I got
Liberty
Always
and
leave out the
justice.
We do it every day at school, so.
it wrong. Hi, Linda.
Hi.
Okay. All right, public speak. I don't see any public here. Am I missing anybody? Nope. So we are done. Does anybody have any additions or deletions they want to add to the agenda? No? Good. Eric, you're up.
Okay, can I share my screen, Amanda?
Yes, go ahead. Hello,
Okay.
everyone.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Okay. All right, let me single screen this. Not quite like that. All right, so I'm going to go through just the notes I made since the packet went out, because that stuff you already have. First things first, we did finally get the senior transportation bus grant, and that turned out to be 100% grant because the state got some extra money to fund that. So we're going to be able to get a new 12-passenger bus that will replace our 21-year-old 20-passenger bus, which we're going to haul down to the transfer station and junk. So that's really good news. We applied for that grant last year also and did not get it, but this year we did get it. So that's good. I didn't want to send it to you right before the meeting, so I'm going to send it to you after the meeting. All the expense sheets, Jay and I worked on them together, and we'll give you all that to review, so you'll have a month to review. Basically, it's the expenses to date for Public Works, and then forecast through the end of the year. Instead of doing it, excuse me, in the over expenditures, through a bunch of the things that you're going to see next month for over expenditures. The reason you're not seeing it here is the bigger ones have to go through the Board of Selectmen first. Last year, we anticipated spending money out of capital equipment to repair the body of the 2005 International Plow Truck. We made a decision late in the summer, instead of replacing the body, which was about a $40,000 expense, we'd take a crack at welding it and just putting it back together. So by doing some of the work ourselves internally and just subbing out the worst of the welding, we got the expense down to about $10,000 to repair. So it ended up being about a quarter of the cost. But it's only $10,000. It was no longer a capital expense. The problem is that the Public Works maintenance budget is only about $18,000, and we can't absorb an extra $10,000 unanticipated expense out of that budget. So what I'm going to recommend, and after talking to Jay, is that we consider transferring $10,000 from the public expense line into the maintenance line to account for the fact that that's what we did with that piece of equipment. I don't know if you guys in the Board of Selectmen will agree to that, but I don't think, based on where we are overall budget-wise, that we can just take it out of contingency, which in a normal year we'd probably be able to do.
I have a question. So that 435 account, I have a year-to-date expended of $16,920.07.
Correct.
Okay, so there's
That sounds
more
about
that's
right.
gotta hit this?
Right. So, and there's no way we're getting through the rest of the year
With
with,
$5,000, right,
yeah, less than that.
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
So that's kind of what I'm gonna suggest we do for that. Or input is on that as a board. But I think that's one, reasonable way we can approach that. So, and we also are already over the overtime budget for Public Works for the year. Now, there were kind of three contributing factors to that. The first was, we obviously had 3 fairly large scale storms, all of which cost us a fair bit of money in overtime expense. And the second thing is we ended up spending a fair bit of overtime, both on the repair of the bridge and also on trying to get the work done at the Veterans Monument Park in time to seed and put topsoil down. Those 3 things contributed pretty dramatically. Jay and I talked about it, and barring any tropical storms in the spring and early summer, we think we can get away with adding just $2,000 to that overtime budget and make it work. And if we do those 2 things, Public Works can keep all budget in the black. Which is to transfer 10,000 into the maintenance, and then keep, as long as they can keep the overtime down to a reasonable amount. Now, that's all.
so I have
Assuming,
one question for you,
shoot,
since we're talking about overtime. I'm looking at the expenditure report that we have in this packet, and there is year-to-date expense of like $1,500 for overtime for snow removal. Is that posted in the wrong spot? Or is that truly we had, as far as I know, it hasn't snowed.
I don't think shouldn't be, ma'am, it could be $1,500. I mean, they have actually salted twice at this point.
So they have expended in the current, the November, $747. I can buy that. Maybe you salted then, but do you think we salted before then?
Not before November.
So we have a year-to-date amount of expended as $1,529.02. So I don't know if something got posted in error there, and I guess I would like you to check that out to see if it needs to be moved to the Public Works overtime. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was related to snow. Because that may change how much money we need to put in the Public Works overtime.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the other thing obviously is that if we have a fairly mild winter, sometimes we can recoup a fair amount of money back out of the Public Works plow budget.
Right.
But we did reduce,
We did cut that last
we
year.
did cut that. So it's a lot less likely that we're gonna have excess in it this year
Right.
than we have in the past.
So,
But it's also December 15th and it's been essentially no precipitation so far. So
Be 60
You know,
tomorrow.
it's certainly not setting up to be a bad year so far at this point.
Right.
On diesel fuel and gas, we're gonna be probably under budget on diesel and over budget on gas. And the reason is we switched the F-550 from a diesel unit to a gas unit. And that's one of the most commonly used vehicles we have. And we did it kind of after we'd gotten through that point at the budget. So, those two things will basically cancel themselves out, other than the fact that because we lock in and we guarantee the purchase of a certain amount of diesels, the diesel, both us and the school, I think we're gonna end up with a fair bit of fuel left over at the end of the year, unless it's a really bad plow year. Because they ended up using 3 buses, not 4, and we converted 1 vehicle, to diesel. We're getting that diesel at $1.70 something a gallon, instead of paying market rate because we locked in really early. That's going to be an issue going forward in the next budget, because if we locked in today, we'd be locking in at more than $3 a gallon. So it's going to be somewhat problematic in the following budget. We had a very minor overage in, we were over like $24, which is not too big a deal. A little bit later, I'll talk about all the ones that I think we ought to be keeping a close eye on going forward. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things quickly. The first is I'm working with Sherry to produce a budget book this year to go along with the spreadsheet, and draft out to you guys in the next couple of days. To basically put a single, more fleshed out version of total expenses. Here's what we're doing. Here's the big contributing factors. Here's where we are. Excuse me. And we're also I'll forward you a full breakdown of public works expenses that's more readable. Been working on that. I just didn't want to send it to you directly before the meeting. We are going to get a little bit of extra money from the state's decision to put a tax on nips and return that to the towns. Our local package stores, sold something like 71,000 nips. So if you work that through, that gives us about $3,500 a year. And for the record, the state as a whole consumed 89 million nips last year, which works out to a little over 31 nips per adult, which is pretty friggin' scary. And also makes you realize why there's so much drunk driving. But that's beside the point. So, excuse me. As most of you know, we've hired a new building admin as well as a new assistant town clerk. In both those cases, they're individuals that have kind of retired from previous professions, and neither of them will be taking the healthcare, which is a really big savings for the town. So the town made out pretty well with that. Combined position, because there are more hours total, but there isn't the high healthcare overhead associated with 2 separate positions. So that's good. We have taken in quite a bit of money in the building department. In October alone, we took in about $10,000 in permit fees, which is really kind of crazy, actually. But so although our expenses for salary in that are going up, they're going to be offset by revenue that the town takes in. So that's going to work out, better for the town. In terms of expenses, one of the areas that's working out really well is the transfer station. We're really down on tipping fees and haulage fees and costs for bulky waste and household. And I think that part of that is that last year during the pandemic, everybody and their brother was doing dump runs and cleaning out their houses. And so we had an enormous increase in our transfer station expenses. And without knowing whether that was going to go down or not, we kind of transferred that to this year's budget. So one bright spot is it looks like we're going to have some excess money station account, which is good because there are going to be plenty of other things that are over. So it's nice to have a few things that are going to work out. I'm meeting tomorrow with the rep from the company that bought out Willie Waste. For those of you who know, Willie Waste got bought out by a Boston-based, one of the largest trash hauler companies in the US. We still have a contract for at least the next year. So at least in a 1-year case, our fees are not going to be affected, at least not much, not more than the contracted amount, which is unlike much of Connecticut, who is suffering from the fact that the trash recycling plant is being closed down, the big one in Hartford. Fortunately for us, we're not affected by that. Indirectly, we will be in future years because there's going to be a lot more competition for the space at the trash burning plant that our stuff gets sent to, which is in like Plainfield, I think. And I'm also going to Mid-Naroc's meeting. Mid-Naroc is it's a collaborative effort between about 15 towns in the east that form a committee to deal with, have joint hazardous waste and recycling. So hopefully we'll have numbers in the next couple days and sign contracts for the upcoming year. And then I also put together a list of accounts that I think we're really going to want to watch carefully over the next couple months because we appear to be overspending, compared to where we are in the year. Your transportation, specifically driver's salary. And that's really been driven by the number of medical calls that we've responded to as a town. That's been up quite a bit this year. And that may be a really long-term trend as, our population is aging. And the number of people that are over 85 that are most likely to require those services is accelerating. Town hall custodial supplies were going to be over later in the year, but it's a small enough account. It's not a really big deal. We are definitely going to be over in animal control services. And that's because we signed a contract to use the regional animal control service as opposed to having our own person and having our own facility. I think that contract is reasonable. It's definitely more money than we were paying before.
Has that been posted yet?
What do you mean posted? It's on the town website.
No, so it's in so I happened to look at that and it was like, there was hardly any expense in there. So I was wondering.
Yeah, that's because we get billed quarterly for that. So we haven't got, we shouldn't have paid
Okay.
any for it yet.
So it's quarterly. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Legal advertisements, that's mostly, geared from planning and zoning and inland wetlands. And that just means that they've had a lot of business this year. But remember, those are often also offset by fees coming in because all those legal adverts are paid for by the applicants. So yes, line item, but it's offset globally within the budget.
But where will we see that on the revenue side then? So would that come in for building permits, under building permits?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I don't know, building or land use permits.
I don't see a revenue item for land use.
I think that's just all brought in under the building department.
Yeah, so this budget year, we budgeted 55. And year to date, we've already have close to 43,000. So we should be
Yeah.
going over that revenue number.
Yeah,
this
I mean,
year.
I think we're gonna be close to 100,000 in revenue this year from the
Okay.
building department, wetlands and zoning combined.
Okay. Okay. So as long
Which
as.
is good, because that pretty much pays for the cost
Right,
of the land use agency and the building department, which is perfect. As far as I'm concerned. Let's see. we're a little over for mileage for the assessor, but not in, considering it's a reval year, we probably should have been smart enough to up that a fair bit. And we didn't, and it's not a big, dollar amount. I think by the end of the year, we're going to be over budget a little for custodial services for the town hall and the library. Because we did switch from a service to a person. I hired this guy, William Bell, who does the same thing for Hebron. If any of you have been in the town hall, it's been cleaner the last month than I have ever seen it in my life. And he's also been working on a project list, doing repairs in both the town hall and the library. So from my perspective, it's working out fantastic, but it is slightly over budget. But the Board of Selectmen, and I had kind of assumed, because a lot of the things that he's doing are not just cleaning, but building maintenance, that we would fill in a little bit of that expense from building maintenance. Sorry. Let's see, fire marshal dues. They require a set of certifications. I don't know what, excuse me, it's not every year, but it's every few years. And they were due this year. We split the cost with Columbia because he's fire marshal in both. But we ran over in fire marshal dues. Looks like the overall fire marshal budget. And then the clerk wages in the building department are going to be over. In part because we've had a pretty significant transition between the old employee and the new employee. And because we agreed to split the positions back with the town clerk, the salary for that office alone is higher than the salary for a wage is. But that's going to be partially offset by the assistant town clerk position underspent. And then there are a few line items that are just, there's something wonky with them, and I haven't quite figured out what yet. The equipment maintenance for the tax collector, that's way over, and I don't understand what that's for. I don't think that's a correct, was miss.
Because that was one of my questions. There's a $14,000 expense in there.
Yeah, and that doesn't make sense. And I asked the tax collector about it. She's like, I don't know. I don't think we've spent, we should be right on track. So I gotta work with Sherry to figure out what that is. 0129490 alarm system. That's the Tallinn Dispatch 911 pay every year. It's coded, it's named wrong. And it just, every time I see it, I'm like, what? Town building alarm, 10 grand, no way. So that's what it is. We just need to rename it.
And that building maintenance for town hall is up, so you need to check that one too. The 432.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And we also need to rename 0205843. They changed the name of the organization from NC Mental Health to, I forget, some other crazy acronym, but it looks nothing like MC Mental Health. So when we got the bills in, we were like, what is this and what do you people do? They're like, oh, it used to be. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So we got to do it just so it's easy to understand. It's not a big bill. Organizations that we pay into that services Andover residents. And the other big thing we got to do is under the employee benefits. They're still not, I'm trying not to.
No.
They are still not coded correctly. And we're going to have to come up and structurally change the way we, because the way the payroll system, the fact that the payroll system doesn't roll directly into the accounting software, means that's an enormous number of journal entries every 2 weeks to get those in. And I think the compromise we're going to have to come up with is we're going to have to go back to what we always did historically. Essentially one pool for Social Security, one pool for MRF, one pool for, instead of breaking it out by department, but then breaking it out from prime pay for budgeting purposes. So you have the information broken down by budget to accurately estimate it for the next year, but accounting for it in the budget. Just because I think you add personnel in that department, that's just an enormous number of journal entries that we're not getting to on a monthly basis. And it's really kind of screwing up the whole
I
system.
was looking at this today and I cannot make heads or tails out of it because it's all discombobulated in 2 places. I
Right,
don't care how we do it. If we want to do all the benefits lumped into that benefits department, I'm fine with that. But I want everything. I don't want to be budgeting a piece over here and have nothing, because there's negative numbers, positive numbers, they're all over the place.
right,
And so that, to me, when I look at year-to-date expenses, I want them to be right. And I want it to be right when we're starting to do our budget workshops and starting to be doing this. So I think this should be fixed. If we're gonna go, last year we broke out the budget, we budgeted by department. If we're not gonna benefits as a lump sum, then fix the current budget the way it's set up in the system that way, so we get accurate reporting.
I mean, I think it's possible for budget purposes to break it out by department, but it's got to be combined again.
But the problem comes as we're reviewing the budget, and we like to look at what did we spend last year and what's our year-to-date spending. All those numbers will be off, because remember last year we had all those negative numbers in there when we were trying. And it was confusing for the townspeople. So
Right.
I'm okay if we have a separate sheet to do that, but we need to make sure the numbers, so we can get a good trend history. That's what I want to keep,
Right.
so.
I agree that it is definitely screwed up and something has to give there.
And I'm concerned that if there's an error here, I can't see it because.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we should be spending some time to clean it up now
Yeah,
before we get into budgets. That's my
Concur.
request. That's my request.
it is. It is. So that's kind of it for that.
Okay.
I just had a little statistics on, NIPS in New England. Again, the Andover package store sold 71,156 NIPS last year. So that's our tax revenue, presuming we have the same number of NIPS consumed this year. The tax went into effect on October. But apparently all the package stores stocked up before that, so they didn't have to pay the 5 cents per NIP. So it'll take a while for them to run down their stocks and then the money to start coming in. But we will start getting some residents to it. Andover consumes less than the state average. We only consume 29 per adult per year, and the state as a whole consumes 32 per year.
Because I never bought a nip bottle, never in my entire life.
I think I have at some point, but it's not something, I'm certainly not buying 30 of them a year.
Every time I go in the package store, there's the guy there with his 4 nips and his 2 cans of beer.
Yeah,
Because he's on the way home.
He drinks those before he gets
Gun 4
home.
nips in the parking lot, crack a beer and have a nice
yeah.
mellow ride home, which is crazy. But, and also on a serious note, I did update this today. As of today, our 14-day rolling average of cases per day per 100,000 is a little over 90, or right at the highest it's been since we've had to deal with COVID. So we're very definitely in a pretty significant spike within the town of Andover. Hopefully all of you are, have your shots and boosted. But that's it. And I don't have COVID. That's the one good thing. I've been tested 3 times and they all came out negative. So at least that's good. The number of people hospitalized has gone up, almost 40% in the last week. So even though we're still, only around 700 hospitalized statewide for COVID, that number is, has gone up from 300 to 700 something in a fairly quick, time frame. That's a concern. Not saying there's towns really going to do anything in terms of posture, but that's something to be of concern. We did finally get the heat working again in the community room after a long period of kind of struggling. It turned out to be a $23 part that required about 5 hours to get to, because there's a fire damper in there in the system, which basically if it overheats or malfunctions, this thing pops and it can't just be reset. It has to be removed and replaced. So cheap part, but put us out of business for a while. And that's basically it for my report, unless you have other questions for me regarding that.
Questions for Eric?
16C in your renaming of the 911 costs.
Yep.
I'd like to see you put that in there as basically that's the dispatch center 911 costs, both for police and fire, and an emphasis on the police because they're using probably 65% of the costs of the center or go in for police calls in the town of Andover. So yeah, the remaining is for fire. So if you break that out, I think that it's much more palatable for the townspeople to understand. And the cost.
So how would you want that name?
I would just say Talon County 911 cost for police and fire services.
I'll see whether we can put budget line item, but if not, shorten it.
Stop
keep
it.
the
It's
intent.
very easy. Very easy. They haven't figured out another increase for this year yet. I will hopefully have some information before we start getting into the budget of what those costs may go up. So
Sure. Okay.
I'll let you know.
Fair enough.
Eric, question. I know you said you added this information after we got the package. Has it been updated? I didn't check my email at the end of the day. I checked it earlier. Or, all the things you went over, will we get a copy of it?
Yeah, I will resend out my report to you after this meeting.
Okay.
So you'll have a hard copy of it. I've got a whole packet of stuff, but
Yeah.
I just got reamed out by the Board of Selectmen for sending them information at the last minute. Just even me, it was other people that sent them information. So I'm trying not to do the same thing to you. So I'll send it to you after. So you'll have a whole month to digest.
Perfect. That's why it's hard to ask questions if you're just like, I'm listening to you and I might think of something later. So that's fine. And I
Yep.
did hear that. Yeah, it is hard to get the stuff the same day and then try to be ready that night, but I know that you are. And I hope you feel that. I can't believe you just talked through. I hope you take the time you need to get better, to get
Me too.
well.
Believe me, I'm doing much better now than I was.
My goodness. Wow.
Diane, I had one other question.
Yep.
Seemed like this evening, Sherry's, I guess, Eric, you said Sherry's at the Board of Ed budget workshop. Is there any reason why her assistant meeting when she's tied up with the school?
We probably could. The only thing is, we'd have to pay Marina,
That's okay.
because she's an hourly employee.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, honestly, she doesn't really have any involvement in the budgeting in that aspect of it. So I'm not necessarily sure she can answer most of the questions you need answered.
All right, it's just, she was pretty, privy to pretty much all the budget information that Sherry has for us also. Not sure.
Yeah.
Another thought that I had too, like, we know when these meetings are gonna be. If Sherry prepared like even a memo to us or a report or a statement of where she is, so that you don't always, I always thought this before I was elected, like Eric, how much you reported on everywhere. So it'd be nice if she just maybe gave you a bulletin with a few, hey, I can't make it tonight. Can you make sure you let them know this? That, just a thought. Even if Marina, like if Marina's not trained in that same way and doesn't know everything, it would have been nice if Sherry prepared something for us.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Sherry and I have talked about that, and, kind of one of the compromises that was made, and is because I wasn't particularly happy that the Board of Ed scheduled a budget meeting on the same day that the Board of Finance has had a meeting on the books for, an entire year. So that wasn't great. But honestly, I will also admit, I don't look at when their meeting schedules are, and I don't go to their Board of Ed meetings. So I didn't realize until a couple of days ago that they even had a meeting to check with Sherry and say, hey, are you coming to this one or that one? She's like, really got to go to that one.
Well, Sherry should be coming to you. You shouldn't have to be chasing her down. She
Thank
should know
you.
where she has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You have to be responsible for everything.
I don't disagree, but Val and I have talked about this a fair bit. And one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to free up kind of an extended period of time on the town budget issues between now and, like the end of the first week in January. Because that's
So I'm
really
just gonna give everybody a fair warning, because Diane is not happy with the financial reporting we have based off of the new system. And when we go into this budget cycle, I think, for the Board of Finance, we have a lot on our plates, a lot to do. There's, inflation is going, people are worried about reevaluation. We've got a lot of things to get done. It's not going to be an easy budget to put together, but I want to make sure that we as the Board of Finance have all the information we need to make the right decisions and to do our job. And I will be very vocal if I get something that doesn't work for me. So I just want to put it out, the effort into getting the year-to-date expenses right, get everything cleaned up, because the Board of Finance should not have to try and figure things out. We should be able to do our jobs, look at it, because I think we have a very hard responsibility, because what we do impacts people's taxes and making sure everything's right. We want to make the best decisions we can with the correct information. And
Yeah.
I just really feel strongly about this year we had last year. I just think this year we should have our act together by now. And I just want to make that point. And this.
You were on the other night too, Diane. I mean, I think the Board of Selectmen feel the same way that we do. I mean, they're wondering too, where is she? And, so I agree with you 100%.
I am retired, so I'm not like everybody else. I've got time on my hands to go through these reports, but people who are working or got a lot of things going on, I go through these reports and I'm getting my calculator out to check numbers. I shouldn't have to do that. I'm calculating percentage expended so I can kind of figure out where we are. I shouldn't have to do that. And one thing I will request is, as we get to these budget books and everything, I don't care if you publish it Yeah, but I want an Excel spreadsheet for a working document for me. I want to be able to keep running notes and to know what's going on. So,
Yeah, we know that has to happen.
That
I
has
mean,
to
there's no way we can get through that without it. Not the way we as a town do the budgeting. Yes.
And you've asked for it, Diane, so it's not, I think we've said it at meetings too, and it's not critical. It's been said all along. I mean, even in the questions, so it should be expected. So it's been brought up in both meetings. So we'll see what happens.
Understood.
any other questions for Eric? Or any comments?
Take a day off to rest your voice, but
We're at the finance department report part of the thing here. Eric kind of addressed the numbers today. So, and we have those items that, why are we over here? Building maintenance and the maintenance for the town clerk, that's way out there, equipment maintenance. So we have some outliers, and that's on Eric's list to figure out. And figuring out that whole employee benefit thing. And this report will be a little bit more meaningful. I'm trying to think if I have any other notes. I asked about the overtime on the snow, so if you could check that, Eric.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's a posting error or not. One thing I will say, just to remember for budget, now that we're paying the building official money budget for it next year, I know we're gonna have to guess, but right now it shows as an overage all the time. I know it's coming out of the permits, but we don't have the income coming in. So when we get the building permits, where do those go?
oh, you mean burning official, not building official.
Yeah, so burning permits, I have on the revenue report that we have collected $90 so far year to date. I don't know if that's true or not.
I think we
And-
collected another 30. It's not,
And then we've paid out. Well, I see an expense for comp for $90, so I don't
Right.
know. So,
yeah, so basically it's a
we gotta have a
straight
budgeted
pass-through.
item for it, right?
Right,
Budgeted expense item for it in next budget, because we did that halfway through the year, so.
yeah. The other thing that's gonna be a little problematic is I just got a thing from the state saying all the burning officials in the middle of January, because they've changed the standards and everybody has to retake all the online testing. Go through 6 more hours of training and pass a new exam before they'll be allowed to be a burning official after January. So I'm not sure Scott, to make $90 a year, is going to be too happy about having to retake another 6 hours of training.
I can tell you, I know he's not going to.
And the other comment I want to make as we go forward into this budget process, we have all these funds that show up at the end of our expenditure report. And all it really tells us is what we budgeted for, what we transferred into those funds. I want to know what we're spending out of those funds for budget this year.
Okay,
And I want to have ongoing reporting on that. So that means these accounts should be set up correctly in the budget system. It's an outstanding accounting. The last
Yes.
audit, let's fix it and be done with it. Because we need to monitor, that's really where all our money is being spent out of on these big projects.
yeah, no, you're right.
So.
Yeah, they need to all get transferred from L accounts to standalone funds.
Yeah,
So they have revenue and expenses and are
right.
treated correctly. I agree with that.
So, and I'm gonna this year when we go into budget, so I can know what we were spending this year, so we know it going forward.
Sure.
I have
So
a,
if we set up those accounts right, hopefully we can get them. That stuff.
I got a question for Eric.
Shoot.
What's the protocol for sanding and for snow removal? inch of snow or something like that, that that you use for that?
So there's a fair bit of discretion. So first of all, we use a professional weather forecasting service that's specifically for public works, both for alerts and for forecasting when we're actually going to have snow on the ground, what the pavement temperatures are likely to be, and what's needed. And we very carefully vary the amount of salt we put down when we plow and when we salt, kind of based on what's expected. So I don't think I can't give you after a ½ inch, we do this, because it's very temperature dependent. You don't go down and put salt down before a snowstorm, because then as people drive over it, it just gets bounced off the road and it doesn't do you any good. Usually right after it snows, the first pass you salt only, you don't put the plows down, and you wait till you get about an inch or two, sometimes 3 inches of snow before you plow, because what you want to do is you want to melt that lowest layer so it never adheres to the roadway. But that's also temperature. And we're also starting to buy both treated and untreated salt, because the price of treated salt has gotten much higher. And we're going to start putting down either treated or untreated salt based on the temperature conditions, because treated salt works at a much lower temperature than untreated salt. So I don't know that I can give you a specific answer about when we do what. I can tell you I've made everybody in the crew go through the state green snowplow training, which is basically exactly that, understanding what you put down. And the vehicles are calibrated in the amount of salt they put down per mile. And at the beginning of the season, each of the vehicles is individually calibrated. So we know, how much per length of roadway, and we vary that depending on conditions.
Right. Well,
as a-
I'm sorry. I'm
as a-
asking.
Oh.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, as a general rule of thumb, every time the crew goes out and salts the road, one complete pass of the town is about $1,000 a shot, not including wear and tear on the trucks
Okay.
for salary.
Well,
and salt.
I'm asking that basically, I see some of the Andover Facebook sites, and people are questioning, why are the plows out and stuff like that. And I think they need to somehow be communicated that this is the process, so we don't get some of the, people should know, and people should be expecting certain things to happen during certain snowstorms. So is there anything that we could maybe put on the Andover site to kind of it like you just did?
I think people have to be aware whether on their state road or town road, because I live on Boston Hill, it's state road. They were out that Saturday that it snowed. The state was out sanding.
Right.
Salting, but I don't think the town was out. Do you know what I mean? So.
Right.
Yeah.
And we debated salting early, and in the end, we decided to wait and just
Right.
bring the crew in at 5 instead of, plowing once during the night, because it's cheaper just a little earlier than their shift.
Right.
Because we have to pay a minimum of 3 hours OT every time we bring them in.
I
So-
think people can get confused if they don't know it's state out there.
Yeah, that, and why are people, why is it not being done, or why is it being done? So something to communicate to them. So, because the season's just starting.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is it takes plow routes. So we have 3 primary plow routes in town, and we have about 34 miles of center line. But they're 2-way roads, so that means you have twice as much actual physical distance. So each plow route is around 21 miles. That and all the intersections, it takes basically 3 hours even to do each plow route. So worst case scenario, at about 1.5 inches of snow an hour. So in those cases, under heavy snow conditions, plowing full out as a town crew, you're gonna have somewhere over 4 inches of snow on the ground by the next time the crew comes back. And people have a hard time getting that you didn't plow my road. Well, actually, they're plowing it pretty much continuously. It just, that's how long it takes to get back. So,
That's what I mean, people. And if something can be publicized, something small, just so people know, and for questions that come up, we can always direct them to the Andover website to kind of explain their answers, their questions.
okay, that's a good thing for the Public Works Director to write up. I hear you.
Okay,
That makes sense.
appreciate it.
Eric, I have one more quick question with this. So you're saying in the future, and I know Diane was talking about this, we're just gonna see lump sums of all the benefits? So say like, and I understand it takes journal entries to get the reports like this in each department. So like the retirement, you're just gonna have like one line item for that now going forward? Diane
Yeah, and
and I
that's
were talking about
actually how we always did it up
Yep,
to this
yep.
year.
Yep.
And I did not realize how much of a hassle it was going to create to make the finance department do that. But that's, and if we, for instance, ever switch to the payroll module and decided to buy the payroll module from this company and get away from Prime Pay, it's possible we could make it do it seamless. But right now, it is not a seamless process, and there's no way to integrate the two software packages.
Right. So putting it in from every paycheck, keeping it, yeah, got it. All right.
Yeah.
So that I don't have to bring it up another meeting. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have any other questions? All right, we're on to budget transfers, and I have a question because I was trying to look this up today
Shoot.
because, because of all these line items that are just starting to pop.
Right.
When we have our over expenditure report, because I've never seen an over expenditure report in a long time, and I know we have them. So our policy was, and I can't remember, and I don't have a document that I can find. I know that you 2 to 5K goes to the Board of Selectmen and 5K and up goes to us. Is it by line item or is it by department total?
As far as I know, it is by line item.
Okay,
Not
so
by
we have some
department.
over expenditures that should be reported to us.
Yeah, and
That's the
actually,
wrong places.
if on my report, which I will send to you, I put a PDF copy of this, which report with not all of them, but some of the ones from Public Works, the ones,
Okay.
part of the reason is some of them will have to go through Board of Selectmen before they come to you anyway. So there was no way, because I didn't have them in time for Board of Selectmen. So there was no way I was going to be able to give them to you directly anyway. So that's on me. That's totally my fault.
So just for everybody, because I looked this up to old minutes to find it because I couldn't find a procedure or a document on the website and it's not in the charter. So at a previous meeting in 2019, we gave Eric the authority to approve over expenditures up to $2,000 himself, 2,000 to 5,000. Eric has to approve and then it has to go to the Board of Selectmen for approval. And then anything that's 5,000 to come to us for approval. So that's kind of.
Yeah, but you get a copy of everything.
Right.
You just don't have to, technically, you don't have to motion anything that's under 5,000.
Right. So, all right, we're done that. We're under old business. Community Senior Center Building Committee. I'll give you an update on that committee. So last week we met with the architect and the engineer, and it was the first coming back of the preliminary site plan and preliminary renderings of the building. Okay, so it's by not even close to being final. We had a very good meeting, a lot of discussion had. We're reorienting the location of that, trying to fit it on the site right now. So all those revisions are back with the architect. Hopefully, they will be able to come back with a final site plan in January meeting, if they get it done by then. And then conceptually, all we talked about is what the outside of the building looks like. We haven't even talked about, we're not even close to anything about construction costs, insides, anything like kind of where we're at. I think, you know, the way the proposal was done and the discussion, I think it'll look nice, and we'll see. It's slowly chipping away. So once they have the site plan, then they'll finite the budget a little bit tighter based on what we want for construction. And then we'll probably, after that, it's going to be up to at some point in time, we have to give the information to the public. And, you know, it's just, we've got to have an estimated budget. It's not going to be even close to being the final budget, because this is just preliminary stuff. Until we get total buy-in, we're not even going off after, you know, doing the RFPs for the actual construction and drawings for the building yet. So
The one thing I would caution you, Diane, is that, I mean, the architect is using, I mean, they do have a professional estimator. So I think you'll find that if the final assumptions are correct, the cost estimates will be pretty close. If you end up making major changes in what you're doing, all bets are off. But final renderings represent what the town actually builds.
right.
You can probably guess that the cost estimates will be reasonable.
So we told the architects we're a cheap town and our budget's $1 million. That's it. So, because once you go over $1 million, then we have different things we have to deal with, which will make the costs more. We don't want to do that. So where we are with that. So those meetings are the second Thursday of every month, and it is an in-person meeting. It's not a Zoom meeting, because a lot of times we're talking about drawings and designs and things like that. So anybody's welcome if you know, the architects are coming in. It's an interesting meeting to see what they have to say, and they project up, you know, their renderings and drawings. It's an interesting meeting. Okay, new business. Okay. We have town hall electrical upgrades. We don't have to do anything, act on that, Eric, right?
No, not until we get the more
Right.
complete plan. I'm kind of annoyed, but I'm really struggling to get contractors to actually respond to me. Which is, you know, I get everybody's really busy. Especially in the HVAC field today, it is crazy. I mean, when I was trying to get somebody after M&M kind of imploded, and I was trying to find somebody to come in and just clean and test our boilers, like I reached out to Nutmeg Mechanical, and they told me they could schedule me in 7 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, well, the furnace isn't running now. I'm not waiting 7, because it'll be time for you to do the air conditioning then. You know, and Nutmeg's a company I've dealt with for many years and have a personal relationship with. You know, so it's really crazy right now. Which is not an excuse. But it's an annoyance.
Can you give everybody an update of the I don't know how many people went to the Board of Selectmen meeting, but the assessor was on with Vision and they did an process. and everything. And I'm like too old to remember everything.
Okay, so basically at this point, what's happened is the preliminary assessments have been done on all the properties. So Vision went around and measured the exterior of all the properties and then got into all the buildings that they were allowed to, that allow them into. So all the property cards are as updated as we have information for. And based on that information, they then take all the homes that have been sold in the last, 1 year. So they have a 1-year window between October of 2021 and October of 2020. There were about 50 homes in the town of Andover sold in that period of time. The exact characteristics of that house versus the cost. And they fit that, they use an algorithm that basically fits the existing sales data. And then it's also adjusted for the fact that as the year went on, houses that sold in October got sold for a lot more than houses that got sold for October the previous year. Because in the state of Connecticut, went up like 15% in the last year, which is crazy in and of itself. So they take that data and, they create a model. And they first test the model and say, how well does the model fit all the existing homes that are sold? And then once they're sure the model is good enough, that model then gets applied to all the homes in Andover. And the only thing that's different is there's obviously a very heavy geographic component to it because there are areas of town that tend to be much more valuable than others. Obviously, the Lake District and waterfront property has seen a huge increase in costs of sales this year. And actually, that trend has continued since 2019. And after issue everybody a revised revaluation. And then they held an informal appeals process, not appeals, but an informational session. And if homeowners had additional information or had concerns about anything, they could come in and either do it via telephone or do it in person. Those are still going on now. And they'll be going on for the next month because but they try to get the bulk of them over early. There were somewhere around 50 people already that have requested a early hearing, that have been done already. I think there were 4 more scheduled for this Thursday. And John Chaponis said he had something like 8 or 9 interior inspections that people had requested, where they felt the code for the quality of interior construction didn't really match what was actually there. And they were houses that the assessor's vision appraisal hadn't been in. So for those, either John or a vision rep will go in, if they're allowed, and visually re-inspect the inside of the house and correct anything that's an error on the card. After that, starting in February, Board of Assessment Appeals meets and hears people who, after vision goes back and re-examines the data that's been presented to them, makes any modifications that they think are appropriate, they kind of finalize the list. And it then gets put back out to anybody whose appraisal has changed. After that, those people can go to the Board of Assessment Appeals and present their case to the Board of Assessment. It's a 3-member board elected, and they can present data on why they think their evaluation is incorrect. Board of Assessment Appeals makes whatever determinations they're going to make. And if people are still unhappy, your final recourse is the state court system taking the town to Superior Court.
My question, I
Now-
can't remember what he said. For us to get the final revaluation for the grand list, did John say he was gonna provide that by the end of January, or is it the end of February?
End of January.
Okay, so then any adjustments from the appeals would come after that.
Yes, but I mean, since, out of 1,200, typically, your appeals, you're gonna get 20 or 30 appeals, or less.
That much.
And if you think about it, out of 1,200 houses, if you've got all the automobiles, all the personal property, 1,200 houses, and you only have 30 that are in question, it's not going to change the grand list enough
Right.
to matter. So they have a specific deadline they have to certify by, which I think is February 1st anyway. And so I'm sure they will meet that. And that also doesn't encompass the, all the supplemental assessments, which won't even be made till, January or February anyway, as people buy and sell cars and things like that. So there are always changes to the grand list anyway. The grand list is fixed in time, particular point, for convenience sake, because the town has to have some number to function, but it's never going to be perfect. And, the absolute grand list on any particular day is never exactly that number that's reported.
Questions for Eric on that? No, okay.
And you can all listen to the Board of Selectmen explanation by John and the senior appraiser from Vision Appraisal, because I think they do a much better job of explaining the process than I do. That's for sure.
It was interesting to understand the statistical modeling they have to use and how it's regulated and things like that. It was kind of interesting piece to get a chance to listen to it. It was good.
Yeah.
They did a good job, explaining it.
Okay. All right, so item 8C, Board of Finance 22-23 requested budget. So one of the things that Mark sent to me was we need to provide a budget for this department, the new budget going forward. And of course, it depends on how many meetings we do. And we have in our budget now, I believe, $2,500 in legal. And last year we took it out, but then at the 11th hour, we put it back in. So if available, we would do our budget for the number of meetings we're gonna have plus the 2,500 legal. I think, does anybody have any input on that or any questions on that or anything you want to see different? You good with that? All right. All right, schedule budget workshops. Yippee! I went back to the calendar and last year we did 3 budget workshops in March, 1 in April, and then towards the end of April, we had that public hearing. So we had we actually had 1, 2, 3, 4 workshops and then the final public hearing. So I think last year the budget came to us March. So we really have March and April to do our stuff. Last year we did it on Wednesdays. We did 3 meetings in March.
Can I share my screen here real quick?
Go ahead.
All right.
You have the timeline, right?
Yeah, I want to put the timeline up.
That timeline is also out on the town website because there's a
Right, that's
budget
where I'm
thing.
copying it from.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so there, you have to hit to get to the first, town meeting budget session. There it is. Yep, May 17th. No,
Right.
May 3rd or 4th, townwide budget meeting number 1.
So we
We have to
have
be-
to have the budget meeting for the town meeting by April 26th. Last year we did it on April 21st.
Oh, there it is. I see. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so we really need to do a minimum of 3 meetings in March.
I mean, typically it makes sense to do that tempo. I think we generally do that because that's when all the information is pouring in. I personally would love to spread it out more and get started earlier, but a lot of times just the information isn't ready yet. It's not ripe yet, you know?
We didn't get it, and the way I see it, we're not gonna get the stuff from the Board of Selectmen in middle to end of February.
yeah, the goal is to have the Board of Selectmen turn over a completed budget to you, at the end of February, so you have all March and all April to do your part.
So for us, that means we have to book meetings in March. Do you want to just do every Wednesday in March?
We can tentatively schedule something and then if for some reason we don't need it, we can pull it.
So we really had 3 budget workshops and then our regular meeting, right? So,
Mhm. So it's basically every Wednesday of the month.
right. Does that work? And then so if we hold with that pattern, I'll put out 3 budget workshops in March, every Wednesday, our regular meeting, and then a budget workshop early April. And then it's the
And then that
public
leaves us
hearing.
like a little wiggle room if we need an emergency
Right.
cleanup, right?
Right, and the only
Before
wiggle
going
room
to
we'll have
town.
is the beginning of April,
Right.
or change our regular meeting to a budget workshop.
I mean, your public budget hearing really needs to be kind of at the end of April, somewhere,
Yep.
by the 25th.
Right. So we did it last year, April 21st, that public hearing. So we have to have everything done by then
Yep.
and ready to go.
I like the March plan. I think we have, and then if we have to change it or add something, I mean, do we have to decide everything tonight?
Well, I just want to make sure everybody gets it on their calendar. Eric, what do we have to do for this? Just give it to Amanda to get posted, or?
Yep.
All right,
And it's far enough out that you can add them and make them regular meetings and not special, which is good because that means you've got more flexibility with the agenda and adding things at the last minute. So if you do it now ahead of time, because it's more than 30 days before you schedule, they don't have to be special meetings.
okay. So I'll send an email to Amanda with the dates. And we'll do every Wednesday in March. So 3 budget workshops, which will be regular meeting. Then the next first Wednesday in April for another budget meeting.
Okay, so you're planning on meeting March 2nd, 9th, 16th, 23rd, the 30th, and then April 6th. That's what your
Yeah,
run is. It's
yeah,
gonna be a hard month,
yeah.
We did it
Nothing
last
was
year.
more fun than last July.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And we also have to face, we have some things helping us out and some things hindering us. I mean, if we're losing the bond payment for AES. And we're really decreasing the bond payment for RAM. So as long as they're not knuckleheads at RAM and they bring that bond payment in, and actually don't suck that money up for something else.
You know, there's going to be a turf thing in there.
So I'm sure there's gonna be a turf thing, but remember, they still had a $600,000 surplus.
Right.
So if they spend the surplus dealing with the turf thing and give the town credit for the reduction in bond payment, the town will do okay.
Yeah.
But we've got some serious inflation we got to deal with in a number of things. I mean, I was kind of shocked. We had our rep, because, you know, one of the things we need to start planning for is it won't be in this year's budget, but in the budget year after that, you know, we're planning on buying another plow truck. The last one we bought was $100,000. The rep today said you could expect to spend $240,000 for that if you signed a contract today. That is a huge hit for that. And that is what I was not anticipating it was going to be anywhere near that kind of jump.
And
So-
you know the reason why, right, Eric?
Stuff's more expensive.
It's called commodity surcharges put on there by the federal government because all the American steel and everything else, and we're back buying it from China and everywhere else. So the same thing in the fire truck market. I mean, it's gone up 10% just this past year for commodity surcharge. So it's just the reality that we all have to face. So
Wait till we start buying electric plow trucks. Those are going to be expensive.
well, right now they're estimating a standard fire pump electric is about 1.3 million each right now. And if not gonna get higher. So figure that one out. Unbelievable. So
Crazy. All right, so we're good for the meetings. We'll do that.
a quick question, Eric. Who puts out the notice to the boards and commissions? Is it you? Is it us in regards to, say, keeping your budget at a zero increase based on all the different things that we're going to be confronting in the upcoming budget year?
Well,
Who normally does that?
I don't know. I mean, if you as a Board of Finance decided to put that statement out, you certainly could. I'm not sure all the boards and commissions do that. Because they also have salary and things like that, which are regulated by union contracts. So I'm not sure how realistic that is, but you can always ask and tell them.
It's always it's happened a lot in previous years. You know that.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I had Bob Burbank tell me that many years in a row. That the year we had to do the plan of conservation and development, and I explained to them that since they refused to put any money away for it, and we're legally mandated to do it, they're going to have to pony up. And the Board of Finance did, but fortunately, we actually budget for that stuff, so we don't have the huge shockers we did then.
Well, just trying to set a baseline to start. That's all.
It's going to be an interesting year. Because I don't think this town's going to vote for a budget increase.
Exactly. Hence my point, Diane.
I think everybody's a little, with the way inflation and the price of things have been taking off. everybody's a little
Well,
scared.
Well,
I mean, the
how you gonna run the
problem
town?
with that mentality is that the town faces the same inflation
I'm
problems that everybody else does. Because let's be honest, we're gonna be paying $1.25 more a gallon for all our fuel. And our electricity's going up 17%, and I mean, we still are required to, we have union contracts. So, I mean, we can't zero out everybody's salary increases. We're not realistically gonna come in with a zero-based budget, unless we do more significant reductions in town services. And if we have to, we will. I mean, but I mean, we see with the effect of Bunker Hill Bridge, what happens when we decide not to fund stuff. You know, and that's gonna be repeated in other areas of town.
All we can do is put together a good, solid budget for what we need to get done
Yep,
and let the taxpayers.
yep.
Eric, quick question. Are contract negotiations ongoing right now with some of the unions that their contracts are ending? Or has that been settled?
No, actually, we haven't finalized a contract for the one that expired last July. And the other one expires next July, so we're gonna be working on both.
All right, yeah, I knew one was expiring this coming year. I didn't know.
Which are those, Eric? Which are those?
The that covers just the 3 employees, which is assessor, assistant assessor, and tax collector. That one's still being negotiated right now. The good news is we agree on all the monetary parts. We're just don't agree on actual contract language on a couple of things. So I think we're close enough that it's practically solved at this point. We're still gonna argue details. You know, and that contract will come in for next year. Future salaries increases will be around 2.6 or 2.7%. So given what inflation is, you know, I don't think that's overly generous, that's for sure. We're gonna be in good shape on is the RAM consortium for healthcare has been consistently underrunning the statistical models for expenses. So we're definitely not going to have an increase in our healthcare costs this year, which is huge. So that's going to be, you know, one really good thing we have going for us.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question for Eric. What about grants? Do we have anybody actively looking for whatever grant we can apply for? In my line of work, I'm working with numerous customers that have hired grant writers and things like that for, I mean, everything from a fire, a piece of hose. There's grants out there available for everything, especially with all the stimulus money. What are we actively doing as a town to try to find a grant for whatever it is we need? Is there anything actively going on? Because I know a lot of towns are.
So, believe it or not, we write a fair number of grants and we get a fair number of grants. We got a fairly good technology grant from Craig Bisha not very long ago. We have the connectivity grant. That's almost $250,000. That's on top of the DOT agreeing to the signalized exchange, which was another $150,000. We got a steep grant for $130,000 that's getting applied into road work. We got a $77,000 grant for senior transport. We get a bunch of grants through the town clerk's office. We get other grant funding for both senior transportation and senior activities. You know, we have a grant application pending for a feasibility study for improvements on Route 316 to make it more walkable and bikeable. We're just waiting for a big grant to become available to add a couple of car charging stations at town facilities. You know, I'm already kind of working with the electrician on putting that together. It was supposed to be out in December. The state has now said they're not going to put the grant out until February.
Right.
I've got a DEP grant out right now. So writing in are fairly successful bringing in grant money. But you're right, if we had a professional grants administrator that was, you know, that we were paying to write them, you know, that would accomplish part of that. You know, and a lot of towns use the town planner as a grant writer. That's something that towns do, but we don't have a town planner either. So no, we don't have a super formal mechanism for doing it. But I mean, that's why I go to all the CROG and CCM meetings. And I sit on the transportation committee and the policy committee, because that's where you find out what those grant opportunities are. So, I mean, I definitely where I think it's worth our while. But you know, there's only one of me. So
Understand. The second half of my question is, that stimulus money we got, what is that being used for?
absolutely nothing. It's just sitting there.
Really?
Yep.
And how much is that? Again?
Just under $500,000.
Okay.
But as far as I am, Board of Selectmen intends to use that because that allows us to build a community center. If we keep the budget under $1 million, we can build the community center without going back to the taxpayers for funding. We need
Okay, awesome.
approval, but we don't need to raise revenue. So with the money we have available, plus the first tranche of the ARPA funds, you know, we can build the thing, you know, cut into taxation. I think that's really what they're going for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I do think that, and we're trying to prep for the possibility that there's going to be increased funding for, you know, transportation stuff. If the Biden you know, stuff that's gone through the Senate and the House, nobody really knows. I mean, we know what the numbers are, but we don't know how that's going to get allocated. Presuming a substantial portion of that trickles down to the municipality level, you know, we have to be ready to get some culvert work done and some stuff like that.
Right.
And we're working to kind of put that together now. So, you know, we know what the number, you know, ready to go
Okay,
when it
thanks.
becomes available.
Sounds
But we
good.
don't have a town engineer, it's, you know, I mean, all these staff we normally rely on to do these things, we just don't have. So, and that definitely hinders us, you know, as a town. Because it's, I mean, you know.
Can you close your screen, Eric? I don't need to see your
Oh,
stuff
sorry about that.
up there. Do
I
that.
guess I don't realize it because I have split screen anyway, so I see all the faces.
So, anything else? Anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Maybe I missed it or something, but is our audit done? And if it is, are we going to have copies before we start doing next year's budget?
The audit is not fully done, but it's pretty close. And we're at least 3 or 4 months ahead of last year's schedule on when we're going to get the audit. So I think by the time, I'm pretty sure by the time the Board of Finance gets the budget, the Board of Finance will have a completed audit too. So.
Thank you.
Especially considering it was not that long ago when we were 3 years behind on the audit.
I know, I was going to say, I can't remember the last time we had an audit done before the Board of Finance started
I can't
working.
believe
on
you
it.
guys got away with that. I just,
What are they gonna do? Take our town charter away? You
I
know?
don't know, but you would think we'd have to pay a fine or something.
We explained that we were a poor little town, basic things, and
They got more stupid and we didn't know what was.
Nobody decided to drop the hammer of God on us, so we got away with it. But yeah, we were we were hilariously behind for a long time, and it's really nice to catch up.
All right, the next one is the approval of the meeting minutes for Wednesday, October 27th. Does anybody have a motion to approve those?
Make a
minutes?
motion.
Kurt makes the motion. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
And the seconds. Favor? Any discussion? Put it that way, no? All in favor? Aye.
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 Unanimous, okay, approved. Yay. Liaison reports. I talked about the community center. I don't know, Rob, you're on the CIP, so do you have anything?
I think I do, but I'm sitting here trying to remember it, and maybe Eric can. It was a small matter where it was suggested that we might want to put some fund money away for the eventuality of buying a piece of equipment. Eric, do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, you had asked at the last meeting, or the CIP had asked at the last meeting to have the Public Works supervisor present to discuss the capital plan for Public Works, which was presented to CIP. That discussion will recommence tomorrow. I will not be there because I got to be at the Mid-Nerock policy board meeting. So
I
can't
thought there
make
was a
CIP.
specific piece of equipment that we didn't have a fund for, that we had talked about creating a fund for, Eric. Obviously not a fire truck because we already have that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
Because it's been a little while.
I know what you're talking about, and I
Yep.
can't remember what the heck
It was
and I
a
the one-
fairly small thing. It wasn't like we needed to put a lot of money away, but it was
Right.
just a planning issue. Damn, I am really sorry, everybody. I thought I would remember it, and of course, it's been like 4 weeks, and I've forgotten the piece of equipment in question.
I wasn't at the meeting.
I will.
Was that
Kurt, do
helpful? No, I wasn't there, and otherwise I'd help you.
Covering myself in glory this evening, I know. But we'll have our meeting tomorrow night, and I'll circle back on it. I don't think it was we have to do this right now kind of a thing anyway. It's
Right.
more of a future planning.
Oh, you know what it
issue.
was? I had suggested that assuming that we get the senior transportation this time with federal grant money, that the town ought to consider, because the town's never had any kind of permanent planning or any kind of permanent funding for senior transportation. And you ought
That's
to
it.
you ought to do a capital fund for senior transportation.
Good
And it
idea.
doesn't have to be a big amount.
No.
You know, you could get away with 10,000 a year. And by the time, we really or another vehicle, if we can't get federal funding for it, we'd be able to buy it.
That
and
was
we ought
it.
to consider that.
That was it. 10K a year for, the next time we need a senior van, to the extent we can't get a grant. That was it. Yep.
Yep.
Because right now we have, if we don't have a specific fund for it, we don't have a way to save for it. Unless, you look at unexpended fund balance that way, and that's not the way it works.
Yeah, and the other suggested repeatedly to the Board of Selectmen, which they don't seem to be, considering, but is still a really good idea,
Of course it is. It's yours.
is that we purchase one small vehicle for senior transportation. And the reason is very simple. We do almost the majority of trips we take with senior transportation are one driver and one passenger going to a medical appointment. Passenger is not handicapped and does not need a vehicle with a lift gate. And we're driving them roughly half the time we're driving them in a 12-passenger van because both of our vehicles are in use at once. And it's just not smart to be putting wear and tear on, if for no other reason than at 18,000 miles, we needed a new set of tires, that's $1,300 or $1,400 for. and they're not exactly fuel efficient vehicles. So I have suggested that we look at purchasing a small electric, vehicle that's not too high, so not a full SUV height and not super low. So it's easy for people to get in and out as kind of our lowest cost per mile transportation option. And we use that whenever possible. Seniors going to medicals.
Right, or even a fuel efficient, gas engine car, a Honda Fit to drive people around, just as, thinking of my mom's car.
Right.
But instead of hauling out a 10, 15 passenger vehicle, diesel monstrosity to take one person to the doctor. It makes
Right.
sense to me, but the question is, all right, so the capital cost of that is what we have to maintain that vehicle too.
Right.
You
And that's part of the reason, excuse me, I suggested an electric vehicle. Two reasons. One, I think the town's going to have to learn to deal with electric vehicles because they're coming whether we want them or
Yep.
not. And number two, right now, over the lifespan of a car, the lowest cost of ownership is still a low-end electric car. You add in fuel and you pay more for the vehicle initially, but your maintenance costs are lower, and your cost per mile driven is lower because electricity is cheaper than putting gas in a vehicle. So, I mean, that's really my rationale for buying it now. And personally, I would buy a Chevy Bolt. I'm not a huge Chevy fan, but I've driven the Bolt around. They're easy to get around. They drive pretty,
Gotta have something to plug into our new charging station.
and that's part of the reason
Part of that
why.
new community center.
Yeah, we'll get
Exactly.
some experience with those vehicles too. I see the point.
No, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and likewise, I really think the next pickup truck we buy for Public Works should be one of those new friggin' F-150 because
Yeah.
the same reason we are going to get stuck dealing with electric utility vehicles.
Yep.
And we have to have the experience maintaining them, dealing with them, figuring out what happens, what goes wrong, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And I want to do it with a little one before I am stuck with, paying 500 grand for an electric plow truck and then figuring out what the problems are.
It's gonna be more than that
Maybe.
right now.
See.
Okay, any other liaison reports?
I just had one thing to add to Rob's report is the fire commission received a request to also update their 10-year plan for fire apparatus replacement, which we are working on. So, because things are changing daily in the industry and stuff. So we may have either over our request or not enough of our request. So that's what we're trying to figure out right now. And Chairman Barton brought that up at our last meeting.
Yep.
Any other items you guys want to talk about?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the transfer station. We're on regular speak, right?
Yeah, open discussion, we're on board, open discussion.
I went up there the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and everyone's garbage was piled. Probably when I was there, it was 12 to 15 feet high in front of the dumpster that usually compacts, each bag you throw in of regular household trash. Apparently, our carting company did not bring back on time the containers. So Dominic had everybody stacking their garbage piled high and praying to the good Lord that the company would come up with a dumpster to hit the compactor so he wouldn't have to leave it for the weekend. Did you know anything that happened? When was that?
Yeah.
That was a Saturday after Thanksgiving. Dominic had called Willie Waste or whoever they are they'll be up there sometime if they can get a driver to bring one up. So the town was almost in a pretty bad time with all that household trash piling up there, especially if it had to overnight.
Well, I mean, if worst comes to worst, we would throw it in an open dumpster and tell Willie Waste, hey, your problem. We've done that before. They
No, I
get,
understand. Full too, Eric.
yeah, that's a problem.
Everything was full up there, and there were no. Never brought back the dumpsters for the thing. So I personally, and I brought this up before, is to look at our costs for. We must rent the. Do we rent the containers from Willie Waste? That we use to compact our garbage into their container. We pay them to cart the containers back and forth each week.
Correct.
And looking at, I haven't started my research yet, but the town of Marlboro, town of Hebron, went and purchased their own containers, and they both towns started out with a used container truck, or I mean, what do they call those? The compacting trucks, haul them back and forth themselves with their own town employees
Right.
twice a week, to see if we can cut down on the costs of the rental and carting costs with Willie Waste. We do have the personnel to drive a truck. They have their CDL licenses and things like that. And I guess it's not a hard thing to do, to drive to Willimantic, pull into the thing and dump our trash and bring the and be ready to go for the next open day. So that was just a food for thought for budgeting purposes.
Yeah.
And I know we pay a lot of money for garbage in this town, and just trying to get the best bang for our buck personally.
Actually, not really. Our arrangement with Willie Waste is pretty good.
Right now,
And be absolutely thankful we're not a Mira town. Because
no, I understand that. No, I
they're
know
getting
all about that.
screwed right now.
Right, I know all about that and everything else, but I know Marlboro and Hebron both take their trash to Willie Waste like we do. But they do it on their own vehicle, with their own personnel, public works personnel, on a regular schedule, so.
Yeah. They're back to the towns. They're actually having the stuff hauled and disposing of it in Scranton. Can you imagine what the trucking costs are? To run stuff out to Scranton,
Right.
Pennsylvania.
Right, but you said yourself, we're not in that situation, being with Willie Waste, versus taking our trash to Hartford like the other bigger towns.
Yeah.
Because that plant is going to close. So.
Yeah. No, that's the whole state is screwed, and everybody's screaming at it. Mira is screaming at the state. Deep is screaming at Mira. The towns are all screaming at Deep and Mira. The COG are mad. CROG is mad. CCM is mad.
Yeah.
Everybody's mad, but nobody has a solution.
I only brought it up, and I don't think quick enough to take my cell phone and take a picture of the mountain of garbage that was there. Just with the idea of that, have spent the rest of the weekend piled high at our transfer station. So just based on the fact that somebody forgot to bring our dumpster, or the dumpsters that we rent, back to our facility, so we could compact the town's garbage in it. So
Yeah.
and that was there. Everybody that pulled in was making a comment and saw it. So and that was a very, very busy Saturday. Just food for thought.
Anybody have anything else?
Promise.
Linda? No? Everybody good? Well, it's that time of the evening where we can all go home. No.
Have a nip on the drive home, I hope. Maybe a couple.
Hey, we're at adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Kurt's gonna second.
Thanks, Kurt.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey,
Yes.
everybody have good holiday.